Hello again, and welcome to the Karuna Chronicles. I'm Don, and we're going to get right into another examination of where we left off. And what we left off with was impermanence. And this time in this discussion, we're going to look at impermanence, how it affects us in our mental body and in our emotional body, and how this can give rise to suffering if we don't understand impermanence in the correct way. Excuse me. As I said before, impermanence is a condition in our lives that is constantly changing, and there is no stability in anything. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is going to change, and in some macro or micro way, everything changes from second to second to second to second, like ourselves, we have a thought 1 minute, and that thought is terminated and another thought arises, and we may connect a series of thoughts into a topic, but we may not. And I'll give you an example. If I'm sitting here and all of a sudden I think, well, I'm hungry, and some condition has or circumstance has triggered that thought in me, like possibly a rumbling stomach or something or other, and this thought has arisen within me. So I would chain this thought with some others, like, for instance, what do I want to eat? What sounds good to me? Well, I don't know. Let's go to the refrigerator. So I go over and I open up the refrigerator, and now I have all kinds of choices. I can eat fruit, I can eat vegetables, I can eat meat, I can drink milk, I can have a beer. It's unlimited. So my thoughts are going to coalesce into a choice, and I'm going to make that choice. Once I have satisfied myself and my hunger by eating whatever or drinking whatever I choose, then the reason or the condition or circumstance that helped arise the thought of hunger in the first place is no longer present. Now I'm satisfied. Well, we see this as just the stream of life. We're unconscious of the fact that each one of these thoughts is a separate experience, and we don't look at it. But every thought that we have is impermanent because it has a genesis, which is triggered by condition or circumstance that produces the thought itself, which is the activity phase of this process. And as we think that thought and that activity phase is over and we move on from that thought, being impermanent, ceases to exist. Now, certainly we could commit that thought to memory and rethink it at another time, which we will in our lives because we're going to get hungry again. But that's going to be at a different time, a different place, under different circumstances and conditions, and will not be the same as the thought that I just had a few minutes ago about I am hungry. The similarity of thought is what gives rise to the fact that we're not looking at thought as an individual expression and a complete experience. And that can cause us some problems, which I'll get to. It's the same thing with emotion. Emotion is also impermanent. Yesterday, for example, I had a situation with my wife where she said something to me, and for some reason I didn't enjoy what she said, and I snapped at her and said something that was unkind. I regretted that immediately in that moment. But in her, that triggered an anger response, and I could not immediately address my remorse and apologize to her because she was involved with her anger. This morning when I woke up, I talked to her about it, and I told her how sorry I was. And, and I don't know if it's resolved in her, but it is in me, because I completed a scenario that started with one impermanent thought followed by other impermanent thoughts. And then for me, it ended today because I did what I could to maybe not rectify the situation, but complete the activity sequence in my mind and in my heart. So that was both an emotional and a mental condition and circumstance that arose that allowed me to establish this unkindness and anger. And then once I reflected upon it, and more mental and emotional things like remorse and sadness and regret and so on arose in my mind. And then when the right time and situation came up, then I was able to say that I was sorry, which I truly was and am. Okay, so, but all of those things are finished. They're finished as soon as you think the thought. They're finished as soon as you feel the emotion. Now, it's certainly, again, possible to hang on to your thoughts and put them into a memory bank. It's certainly possible to hang on to your emotions and put them into some kind of an emotional vault that we accumulate things like angers or jealousies or desires or things like that, so that they become a condition all in their own. So that, for instance, with anger, as I practice anger and habitually utilize anger as a way of my expression and a way of my mental and feeling body's projection into life, then it becomes habitual and I'm stuck in a way. I'm stuck in anger, both mentally and emotionally. And since they're impermanent, how has this process happened? Well, it's happened because I have taken an individual, isolated thought and feeling of anger and made them something that they're not. I've made them permanent by holding on to them, by being attached to them, by taking them and saying, this is real, this is how I feel and how I think. No, it's how I felt and how I thought in the moment that I did it. But if I carry all of that weight along with me, what I'm doing is simply repeating and reinforcing the fact that I believe that I have anger, and I believe that I have, any other mental condition or emotion that I want to create. And as I solidify that in me through repetition of thought and feeling, my behavior becomes these things, and I become an expression of things that I have created. Nobody has created this for me. I have taken something that's essentially impermanent and made it through my own conditioning and my own circumstances. I've made it a habit. Now, habits are also impermanent, as everything else in creation is. But as long as we choose to practice these habits, they're solid, they're real, and we are experiencing them. So it's very easy to not understand that when you become emotional and you have an outburst of anger, that's a simple human exercise of emotion. It has its genesis, it has its activity, and then it disappears. We choose to continue it on by chaining that original thought with other ones. For instance, so-and-so did something to me and I'm really pissed off about it. And then every time I think of so-and-so, that memory of that comes back to me again, and I experience anger in my mind and in my emotion, but it's different. It's not the same as the original moment of condition and circumstance and causation. It is new. And in that newness, as I keep renewing the thought and the feeling under different time, under different circumstances, under different conditions, I keep solidifying it and reinforcing it. And so we disregard and don't understand impermanence in this setting because we're caught up in the mental thought and mental emotion being valid, being real, and being right, because we choose it to be valid, real, and right. Now, I cannot and will not tell you that when conditions and circumstances arise and anger flares within us as a normal expression of our humanness, that's not real. It is in the moment. What's artificial is us taking that isolated incidents that produced anger at the condition and circumstance that existed in that moment and extrapolating it forward into a habit and into a more tangible condition and circumstances in our lives, so that when any type of condition and circumstances arise, to give us the latitude and permission to react with anger mentally and emotionally, we choose it because it is habitual. This causes us great suffering. And, all the while that we're doing, making this choice out of habit, we're hurting ourselves. We're using anger as a tool, a weapon, a crutch, a validation of who we are, when that's simply not the truth. But taking an impermanent situation and giving it permanence in our mind or in our emotional body is something that is a very human thing to do, but it's done in ignorance. And this ignorance is what causes the suffering, that we become an angry person. And as that anger grows within us, and as we continually practice that habit, then we look for more avenues in which to express that anger. We may originally confine ourselves to verbal. We may say things that hurt other people. But as we continue on with verbal and we feel the power of that anger grow because of our habitual practice, that may translate into something that's physical. And we become a physical bully or, a killer, maybe even. It's hard to say where all of this will lead us. It depends on the circumstances and conditions as who we are as individuals and how strong these habits become. But in essence, they start with something that's impermanent. And we have a choice. And in our next segment, what I want to do is examine the choices on how we look at these impermanent situations in our lives and how we can mitigate the collection of impermanent things to become ordinarily permanent in our lives. What I mean by ordinarily permanent is that we have an ordinary reality as human beings where we look at and accept our human condition in its entirety as real and as it is. But it's just as impermanent as anything else. We're born, we live our lives however we do, and we die. There's the impermanence right there. We die. When we die, all of the conditions that we have created, like possibly anger, die with us. They no longer exist. So looking at this closely may help us to avoid the traps of becoming angry by choosing it, becoming jealous by choosing it, becoming anything by choosing it that causes us suffering or causes others suffering. And that's what we want to avoid in life. All right, well, thank you for watching, and tune in again, and we will continue this discussion. I appreciate you. Thank you. If you like this video, hit the like button, and if you want to find out what's coming, hit the subscribe button. We want this to be an open forum, so we welcome your comments and questions, and we'll endeavor to answer them as quickly as we can. Again, thank you very much.